Welcome to Core Concept HQ, where big ideas are simplified. Today we're exploring bulletproof abs, which is actually the second edition of a book called Beyond Crunches. And I want to be clear from the get-go, this is not about sculpting an aesthetic six-pack for the beach. This is deep dive into functional strength, a really practical guide to building a truly strong core, improving your stability, and understanding the real, often kind of counterintuitive principles behind effective ab training.
And you can feel that different approach right away, can't you? The author we're analyzing here is Pavel Tsatsouline, who was a conditioning coach for the Soviet Special Forces, the Spetsnaz. So this isn't your typical Western bodybuilding magazine approach. It's not focused on muscle growth through fatigue.
Right, it's not about chasing the burn.
Not at all. This is Russian methodology. It's all about an intense focus on maximizing neurological strength, real-world applicable power, and importantly, with minimal equipment. He calls it the tin can approach to elite fitness. It's all about efficiency and rugged, dominating performance over, fancy gym gadgetry.
That difference in philosophy is, I think, the most important thing to grasp right at the start. Prioritizing neural efficiency over just exhausting the muscle. And the people who actually use this method, they seem to back that up pretty strongly. We're seeing these glowing testimonials from groups like the Texas Tactical Police Officers Association. They praise the program for its common sense and practical exercises that get results other instructors. Well, they say they need thousands of dollars of gear to achieve. Exactly. And it's the serious strength community that really latches onto this. Strength authors like Clarence Bass, powerlifters like Marty Gallagher, they all say these non-traditional ab exercises are indispensable. The core promise is pretty simple, really. It's a massive increase in actual physical strength that transfers directly to everything else.
To your overall athletic power.
Yes. To your punching force, to heavy lifts like deadlifts, and fundamentally to being genuinely resilient against injury. The standard is set incredibly high here. Core strength must be measured by its ability to stabilize the spine and generate force, not by how it looks in a mirror. Okay, let's really unpack that. The core concept, no pun intended. If we're talking about real functional strength, we first have to understand the role of the abdominals and why, according to this book, most of us are training them completely wrong. So anatomically, the rectus abdominis, that's the visible six-pack muscle, right?
That's the one. It connects the pubic bone to the breastbone. And its main job, mechanically, is simple. Forward spinal flexion, rounding the back, like in a classic crunch. But that's where the Western approach kind of stalls. It stops at that purely mechanical definition. And that highlights this massive functional disconnect. You can have really well-developed abdominal muscles, you can have the mass, but still be functionally weak.
How is that possible? Having the muscle, but not the strength.
Because the core's primary athletic role, which was discovered by researching elite athletes, is actually spinal stabilization.
Okay, that's the key shift in perspective. So if I'm only thinking of my abs as the things that curl me forward, I'm missing their main job when I'm, say, lifting a heavy box or throwing a punch.
Precisely. Dr. Garrick, who is an advisor for the NFL and even the San Francisco Ballet, he found that so many professional athletes had these visible ab muscles, but those muscles often weren't functioning as back stabilizers. So when they were subjected to a heavy, uncoordinated movement, their core just couldn't handle the load. It would collapse.
And that connects to what Professor Vladimir Tsatsouline said, right? That maximal force isn't just about having big muscles.
Yes, exactly. He described it as a highly skilled action that requires intermuscular coordination. It's the ability of all the different muscle groups to fire together as a cohesive team.
So the core isn't the engine. It's more like the high-performance transmission. If my hips and legs are the engine generating massive power, but my transmission is weak, all that power just fizzles out. It gets lost.
That is a perfect analogy. The core is the nexus for power transfer. It's the chassis of the car. Russian sports research confirmed this connection again and again. They showed that striking force, like the velocity of a punch or a kick, is seated primarily in the hips and the waist. But if your core isn't rock solid, if it can't rigidly stabilize your spine, all that massive rotational power you generate in your lower body is just lost before it ever gets to your fist or your foot.
So functional core strength really means the core stays completely still and safe while the limbs are moving powerfully around it.
That is the essence of being bulletproof.
Okay, so if functional strength is the goal, then how we train has to change completely. The book argues, pretty violently against that gym culture mantra of high repetitions and chasing the burn. But wait a minute. If crunches and sit-ups don't make my abs stronger in the way we're discussing, isn't doing 50 or 100 of them a day at least good for, endurance?
That is the pervasive myth we absolutely have to dismantle. The goal is maximal tension, not fatigue. We have to look at the physiology of muscle adaptation. If you want a muscle to grow, what we call hypertrophy, you need a compromise of fatigue and tension. That's that classic bodybuilding range of 30 to 60 seconds of time under tension or, roughly 6 to 12 repetitions before you fail.
Right. But for the midsection, the goal is usually tone and strength without adding a lot of extra bulk around the waist.
Then you have to focus purely on maximal tension and deliberately, consciously minimize fatigue. The Russian approach seeks strength through neurological activation. It's about making the existing muscle fibers fire harder and faster. It's a skill. It's not about trying to bulk them up with high volume.
And that's why the methodology leans so heavily on what he calls the 3-2 method.
It's an elegantly simple protocol, and it's rooted in pure strength training. It's 3 to 5 sets, 3 to 5 repetitions per set, then a very generous 3 to 5 minutes of rest between those sets.
3 to 5 minutes of rest seems like a lot for ab training.
It's crucial. That long rest period allows your central nervous system to completely reset. And critically, the sets themselves have to be extremely short. We're talking well under 30 seconds, and ideally under 20 seconds. This prevents metabolic fatigue from setting in and keeps the training focused purely on high neurological activation and tension.
I find the explanation for why high-rep training is actually counterproductive for tone and appearance to be the most fascinating part of this. The so-called puff effect. This just flies in the face of everything we've been taught about exercising to failure.
The puff effect is exactly why people who dedicate themselves to doing 100 crunches a day sometimes end up looking softer or, well, puffy. High repetition, endurance-focused training, let's say 15 to 50 reps, is anaerobic. It relies heavily on burning glycogen for fuel. So to prevent running out of fuel next time, the body adapts. It learns to store more glycogen inside the muscle cells.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's the biological catch. Every single molecule of glycogen binds with 3 molecules of water.
So the visible muscle literally looks swollen, but it's swollen with water, not with densely packed hard muscle fibers.
Exactly. This stored water gives the muscle a softer, swollen, or puffed up appearance. And this effect can happen surprisingly fast. If your goal is that corrugated, defined, hard look, you have to avoid this high-rep endurance zone. You are literally training your body to hold water in the very muscles you're trying to define.
That is a profound shift in mindset. But okay, we also have to tackle the myths of abdominal anatomy. Because everyone wants to know, how do I target my lower abs? That's the question everyone asks.
And the answer is probably disappointing for anyone looking for a quick fix. You don't.
You don't.
You don't. The rectus abdominis is a single long muscle. It connects your pubic bone all the way up to your sternum. It's anatomically impossible to selectively develop upper or lower abs. The motor units, the nerves that control the muscle fibers, they're distributed across the entire length of the muscle. They fire as one unit.
So whether you're doing a leg raise or a crunch, you're always training the whole thing.
You're training the whole thing. The feeling you get in your lower abs is often just the insertion point of the muscle experiencing strain, or, more likely, your hip flexors taking over.
And speaking of crunches, the book is, well, it's pretty aggressive. It calls traditional crunches worthless. Why such a strong condemnation for what is probably the most common gym exercise in the world?
The critique is purely technical. It's not personal. The range of motion involved in a traditional crunch is just too subtle, it's too short to generate sufficient resistance or tension in the rectus abdominis for any serious strength gain. You need maximal force to signal a neurological adaptation. A light, short-range movement, even if you do it to exhaustion, it's simply not intense enough to build that bulletproof strength.
What about all the machines, the crunch machines you see in every gym?
The book is pretty clear on that. It says they offer no physiological advantage over doing crunches with good form. They just mask the fundamental requirement, which is always high tension.
So the takeaway here is that definition, that shredded look, isn't just about having low body fat.
No, not at all. Low body fat is necessary. I mean, you can't see the muscle if it's covered by a layer of fat, but it is absolutely not sufficient. We've all seen marathon runners with dangerously low body fat who have completely flat, undefined stomachs. Definition comes from strong, neurologically efficient, high-tension muscle development. If you focus on maximal strength, using that 3 to 5 method, and then you lower your body fat, that's when you achieve that coveted, hard, corrugated look. Okay, so if crunches are basically worthless because of a lack of tension, traditional sit-ups are often seen as something much worse. Dangerous.
This is because of muscle recruitment issues, right?
Yeah.
What is the fundamental danger of this sit-up, even for someone who's an experienced lifter?
The danger lies squarely with a muscle called the psoas major. It's your primary hip flexor. And crucially, its origin point, where it attaches, is directly on the front side of your lumbar vertebrae, your lower back.
Right on the spine itself.
Directly on the spine. So when you perform a traditional sit-up, you're pulling your torso up. If your abs aren't powerful enough to efficiently curl your spine forward, the psoas, which is very strong, takes over. And contracting the psoas pulls your torso up by yanking directly on those lower back vertebrae.
That mechanical shearing action sounds, well, it sounds exactly like what causes or at least aggravates herniated discs.
It is a very dangerous pattern. It can lead to incredible compression and shear forces on the lumbar spine, but the problem actually extends even to the supposedly safer crunch. And this is due to a physiological principle called the law of irradiation.
Okay, let's define that clearly. What is the law of irradiation and how does it play into ab training?
The law of irradiation is pretty simple. It just means that when a muscle contracts strongly, the tension, sort of the ripple effect of that effort, spreads to the adjacent muscle groups. Think of it like dropping a stone in a pond. The waves don't just stay in one spot. Physiologists found that even when you're attempting a perfect spine-curling crunch, your adjacent hip flexors, the psoas, they still fire and contribute to the movement. It's because of this necessary spreading of neural tension.
So it's actually impossible to completely shut off the psoas, even if I'm really, really trying to focus only on my abs.
Exactly. It's just how the body is wired. Now, for a truly strong and coordinated athlete, this effect is mitigated, but the common beginner mistake really highlights the issue. A chiropractor, Dr. John Scaringe, observed that individuals with weak abdominals will always rely on their stronger hip flexors, even during a crunch. They can't round their back efficiently with their abs alone, so what do? They generate momentum by yanking on their spine using those stronger hip flexor muscles.
And the result is the exercise becomes useless for the abs because the tension is going to the wrong place, and it becomes dangerous for the back because the spine is being compromised. So they're actually reinforcing instability instead of building stability.
Precisely. The body always seeks the path of least resistance, and in this case, that's often the most dangerous path.
Moving on a bit to technique, a lot of people complain about neck pain when they're doing ab exercises, and their solution is often one of those neck cradling devices, like an ab roller. Is that a safe workaround?
Absolutely not. The book gives a very strong warning against any kind of neck support device, and it cites Dr. William Kramer on this. These devices create a really unhealthy strength imbalance. You're effectively making your neck muscles stronger than your abdominals, which can lead to chronic neck issues down the line. And besides, since we are using the low-rep, high-tension method, neck strain should be minimal anyway. You're not doing hundreds of reps.
So what's the correct form cue?
It's simple. Keep your chin tucked slightly in and aim for your shoulders to touch the floor on the return. That's it. No yanking your head forward.
And the timing of core work within your whole workout is also critical. Conventional gym logic often says, train your small muscles last. But this book completely flips that. Why is it a firm rule to not warm up or pre-exhaust your core muscles before you do heavy lifting?
It's a fundamental rule of safety and functionality. We already established that the ab's primary role is spinal stabilization under heavy loads. Think about the tremendous pressure involved in a heavy deadlift or a squat or an overhead press. Pre-exhausting these vital stabilizing muscles before a main lift it's like trying to lift a heavy car with flat tires. The entire mechanism of stabilization is compromised.
Because the fatigued core won't be able to generate that intra-abdominal pressure needed to protect the spine.
Correct. By fatiguing your core first, you dramatically increase the risk of back injuries during the rest of your workout. The abs must be trained when they are fresh, when they are maximally capable of generating tension, and when they are fully ready to protect your spine during your heaviest lifts. Core training should come early in the workout, or, even better, in separate, high-quality brief sessions on their own.
Okay, so if traditional sit-ups are flawed because of all this hip flexor involvement, we need a scientific method for isolation. And this brings us to the famous Janda Sit-Up, which is a truly groundbreaking concept developed specifically to solve this psoas problem.
Yes, and the solution came from a renowned Czech physician, Dr. Vladimir Janda, who was a world expert on back pathology. He leveraged a core neurological principle called the law of reciprocal inhibition.
Which is?
The principle states that when a muscle contracts, that's the agonist, or the prime mover, its opposing muscle group, the antagonist, must neurologically relax to allow for efficient movement. Janda realized he could exploit this to force the hip flexors, the psoas, to just shut down.
So how does the Janda technique physically apply this law to isolate the abs? What does it look like?
Okay, so the standard setup is with bent knees, just like you're about to do a normal sit-up. But, and this is the key, the person places their calves or their heels against some kind of resistance. It could be a partner's hands, a heavy machine, or a custom device. And while they attempt the sit-up, they steadily push backward with their legs. This backward push strongly activates the large opposing muscles, the hip extensors, and the knee flexors. So primarily your glutes and your hamstrings.
And since the hamstrings and glutes are the antagonists to the hip flexors to the psoas, activating them forces the psoas to relax.
Exactly. Reciprocal inhibition forces the psoas to neurologically switch off. This completely eliminates that dangerous lower back stress, and it ensures that your torso is lifted only by your true core muscles, the rectus abdominis and the obliques, and not by yanking on your lumbar spine. It's pure, scientific, pain-free isolation, and it leads to incredibly fast and, well, pure strength gains.
The source mentions a great anecdote about how deceptively hard this is. There were world-class bodybuilders and powerlifters who attempted just 5 strict Janda sit-ups at one of Pavel's seminars. What happened?
They were humbled, to put it mildly. I mean, these were men who could squat 700 pounds, who could perform 100 traditional crunches without breaking a sweat, yet they could not complete 5 Janda sit-ups with proper isolation.
Wow.
It just proved that their massive ab development was largely built on compensatory hip flexor recruitment. They were strong, but not in the right way. The book even details a device called the ab pavilizer, which was invented to help people do partner-free Janda sit-ups. And it often uses a bungee cord for assistance because the isolation is so demanding that many experienced lifters are initially too weak to perform even one unassisted rep.
That's a powerful illustration of the difference between just brute strength and coordinated, isolated strength. So once that isolation is achieved, the next key principle is generating maximum tension through the quality of your movement, specifically mastering tempo and negatives.
Tempo is king. Absolutely. You cannot achieve a high level of muscular tension if you're relying on momentum and just moving fast. Moving slowly forces every single muscle fiber to recruit maximally. The recommendation is to move deliberately through the full range of motion. So taking maybe 3 to 4 seconds on the way up, the concentric phase, and another 3 to 4 seconds on the way down, the eccentric phase.
And that lowering phase, the negative, that's where the greatest tension is generated, correct?
It is paramount. Studies consistently show that the eccentric or lowering phase generates up to 1.3 times more muscular tension than the concentric or lifting phase. The optimal approach is to use a level of difficulty that you can lower slowly and, importantly, that you can halt at will at any point. You have to maintain that intense muscular tension throughout the entire descent, making sure your glutes stay locked tight and you really slow down near the bottom.
And to break through those sticking points, those weak angles where you always seem to stall, there's a specific Russian technique for that.
The sticking point technique, yes. On the last repetition of every single set, as you're descending slowly, you pause. And you hold isometrically for 1 to 5 seconds, precisely at your weakest angle. This isometric hold rapidly strengthens that specific point in the range of motion, closing the gap in your overall strength curve. But there is a critical safety instruction here.
Okay.
You must not hold your breath completely during this pause. Instead, you need to take constrained, shallow breaths to maintain that steady intra-abdominal pressure without relaxing the tension.
That brings us directly to breathing. And we're not talking about yoga breathing here. We are talking about maximizing internal pressure for maximum power, what the book calls power breathing.
This technique is rooted in something called the pneumomuscular reflex. Simply put, you have baroreceptors inside your abdominal cavity, and they register internal pressure. We call this intra-abdominal pressure, or IAP. The higher the IAP, the greater the resulting muscular tension, and consequently, the greater your strength output. This is why a study way back in 1961 found that subjects who shouted during exertion got a respectable 12.2% strength boost.
So granting, screaming, or holding your breath briefly, they all maximize that internal pressure. How should we visualize IAP? What's a good analogy?
Think of your entire torso as a pneumatic cylinder, a can of soda. When you increase the pressure inside that cylinder, the IAP, you create this rigid internal girdle that stabilizes your spine and allows your arms and legs to push with maximal force without your core collapsing. So for these high-tension drills, the general rule is to hold your breath while you're in motion to maintain maximum IAP, unless, of course, you have specific medical advice against it. Then we get to the most advanced and maybe the most memorable technique, bending the fire, which was recommended by Professor Tsatsouline.
This technique involves the anal lock. We need to address the physiological reason behind this very specific and often joked about step.
It's a complex technique because it's designed for both maximum tension and maximum safety. It's really targeting the pelvic floor muscles. Lifters and even sedentary people often let their intestines go when they strain under a heavy load. This puts tremendous pressure on the pelvic floor and can lead to issues like hernias or hemorrhoids.
So the anal lock isn't just for creating tension, it's actually a necessary safety mechanism for any kind of heavy strain.
Precisely. It pulls up the muscles of the pelvic floor and it acts as a crucial internal brace. The full sequence for bending the fire is this. Step 1, you inhale to about 75% of your maximum lung capacity. Step 2, you flex your abs intensely. Step 3, you perform the anal lock, contracting the rectal sphincter as if you're, well, holding back. This maximizes your IAP and shores up that pelvic floor. And step 4, you expel the air forcefully over 3 to 5 seconds, but you keep your glottis closed and your butt muscles locked. The sound you make should indeed resemble the hiss of Darth Vader.
And that provides the synchronization of massive internal pressure with external muscular force. That sounds like a fundamental skill for anyone doing serious compound lifts, not just ab work.
It is the absolute foundation of stabilizing against heavy loads. It ensures that no matter how much weight you're moving, your core is a rock. So once isolation and tension mastery are achieved, the program moves into a new phase, integration.
This is about training the core not just by itself, but training the muscles to work as a team for overall athletic performance and spinal stability. We're moving from the Janda Sit-Up to training the movement.
Yes, this two-step process is critical. It recognizes that true functional strength means applying that isolated power you've built to dynamic, coordinated movements. We need drills that challenge the core to stabilize against powerful, rapidly moving limbs.
The first integration exercise mentioned is the Russian ballet leg thrust. Why is this specific drill so effective for core stabilization? It's a favorite among Russian athletes for a simple reason. It forces the abs to do their primary job, which is stabilizing the spine against the powerful pull of the hip flexors.
So you lie on your back, you flatten your lower back completely against the floor, and you must actively hold that flat position while you point one leg straight up toward the ceiling. Your core has to maintain that rigid spinal position against the tremendous leverage created by that raised leg. If your abs fail for a second, your lower back arches right off the floor.
And that constant static resistance develops those deep, stabilizing muscles that Dr. Garrick found were so often weak, even in elite athletes.
Exactly. It's an endurance test for functional stabilization. It develops the kind of muscular control that leads to those highly defined, corrugated abs muscle that can actually handle external force.
Okay, now let's look at some of the higher intensity, non-isolation drills that really push the limits of core strength. Starting with a Swiss ball crunch. You said earlier that traditional crunches are worthless, but this one is praised. What changes?
The Swiss ball crunch redeems the movement because it fundamentally changes the leverage and the range of motion. By performing the crunch over the curve of a large Swiss ball, you effectively double your range of motion. You get this massive pre-stretch on the rectus abdominis, and that amplifies the intensity of the contraction that follows to an extreme degree.
And you mentioned that stretched position is important for posture, for avoiding that adaptive shortening issue. Can you explain that again? What is adaptive shortening, and why does the Swiss ball help prevent it?
Adaptive shortening happens when a muscle is chronically trained or just held in a contracted, shortened position. So if your abs are always tight, but you never train them through a stretched range, they can physically shorten over time. This pulls your rib cage and your pelvis closer together. And that leads to a forward slump, what the book calls poor posture or a hump. Strengthening the abs in this maximally stretched position over the ball actively works against that structural imbalance. It improves your posture.
And the instability of the ball itself means your muscles have to work harder just to keep you from rolling off.
That instability is key. It overloads the deeper stabilizing muscles like your obliques far more than any traditional floor exercise ever could. However, we have to reiterate this point. This is not a beginner exercise. If you have weak abs, you will absolutely revert to using your hip flexors, only now you're doing it with a massive, dangerous range of motion that can severely stress your spine. Okay, moving from instability to sheer brute core strength. The evil wheel. or the wheel jackknife push-ups.
This drill looks simple, but the book's technical instructions are incredibly intense.
The ab wheel is the gold standard for integrated core strength, but only, and this is a huge only if it's performed correctly. It requires extreme anterior core strength and back stability. The single most critical instruction is to maximize your back rounding before you even start the rollout. You have to tuck your butt under and your chin in so your hips are vertical. You're creating a rigid, rounded armor with your torso.
And that rounding is the key safety mechanism. It's what prevents the back from arching into a dangerous hyperextension.
Exactly. At absolutely no point during the entire rollout and return should your butt stick out backward or your back arch. Not for a second. The moment your back arches, the leverage shifts to your weak, non-stabilized lumbar vertebrae, and you're putting your discs at massive risk. Maintaining that rigid, rounded, stable spine under that much leverage is what develops true bulletproof core strength. And then for the absolute pinnacle of core challenge, we have the exercise often associated with Bruce Lee. The dragon flag. The dragon flag is highly advanced. I mean, it requires your spine to be held in a perfect, rigid, straight line while the entire mass of your body is suspended and lowered. You really shouldn't even attempt it until the wheel jackknife is easily mastered. The book recommends starting by cheating your way up. You pull yourself to the top position with your arms and then focus intensely on the negative, the lowering phase.
Why the focus on the negative here specifically?
Because, as we discussed, the negative generates 1.3 times the tension. The goal is to maximize your time under tension during the descent. You want to maintain a perfectly flat back, maybe draw your knees toward your chest slightly at first to adjust the leverage before you eventually move to the full straight body extension. The control required is just phenomenal.
Finally, let's look at oblique specialization and power generation. This is essential for rotational athletes, golfers, fighters, baseball players.
We can actually target the obliques using the Janda Sit-Up just by modifying the negative descent. As you lower yourself, you shift most of your weight onto one foot and you alternate sides with each repetition. The important rule here is that you must not twist your spine. You maintain perfect spinal alignment while you overload one side, forcing the obliques to generate that lateral stability.
And then there's the full contact twist, which comes with a pretty wild anecdote about a Soviet shot put champion. Tell us about that.
It was originally a Soviet shot put conditioning drill designed for explosive rotational power, and it became popularized among Russian fighters. The story goes that a Soviet shot putter, who was known for his incredible core development from this specific drill, was mugged. When he punched the assailant, the force he generated was so immense that he reportedly ruptured the mugger's spleen. It's a spectacular, albeit violent, illustration of the power transfer generated by this movement.
That really illustrates the magnitude of power we're talking about. But the critical technique point here is that this is often done completely wrong in gyms. People do it as a dangerous side bend. It is critical to understand this. This is not a side bend or a traditional twist.
It uses a barbell held in one hand, not a dumbbell. And that's because the long bar naturally develops spectacular grip strength. The main cue for lifting the bar is to push the floor away using your legs and hips. You should visualize lifting a heavy suitcase in each hand to make sure your body raises up evenly. You have to keep your back perfectly straight and not lean back or sideways with the weight. If you lean, you're just stressing your spine without achieving any real power transfer. The movement has to be even.
And bringing the power breathing techniques into this dynamic context for striking, that's the second focus.
The second focus is that final, explosive grunt you add to the very end of the bending the fire sequence. It's a forceful blast of the remaining air. This technique is the cornerstone of high-impact martial arts like board breaking or tamashawari. It's what allows you to peak your midsection contraction at the precise moment of impact.
And what's the crucial rule for spinal safety during any kind of dynamic rotation? The rule is simple and non-negotiable. Twist as you strike, do not twist to strike.
You synchronize that explosive second focus grunt with the moment your elbow or your hand reaches an imaginary target like breaking a brick at hip level. The rotation has to be limited and efficient as part of the natural strike. Conscious, excessive twisting, especially under a heavy load, is dangerous, and it's totally ineffective for generating real power.
Okay, so we've established that the 3 to 5 method is designed to avoid fatigue. But the body is cunning. It adapts to everything. How do we prevent the body from becoming complacent and just accommodating the stimulus so we stop making progress?
We have to adhere to the law of accommodation, and it states that the body generally stops adapting to a training stimulus after about 4 to 6 weeks. It basically says, okay, I'm used to this stress now, I don't need to get any stronger. At that point, you have to introduce variation.
So what is the smart way to apply variation? How does that contrast with the ubiquitous myth of muscle confusion?
Strategic variation is the key. The advice is to select one or two of these high-intensity drills, let's say the Janda Sit-Up and the Evil Wheel, and you focus intensely on them. You strive for personal records or just higher tension for a month, maybe 6 weeks. Then you switch to a different pairing, like the Dragon Flag negatives and the Russian ballet thrust. You must avoid that muscle confusion myth, which is changing your exercises every single workout. That constant change prevents your nervous system from ever fully adapting to any single stimulus. You shock the system, sure, but you never trigger specific deep strength adaptation.
And what about training frequency? Is training the abs every day too much, especially given the emphasis on avoiding fatigue at all costs?
Well, counterintuitively, Soviet research actually suggests that spreading your training volume out is superior for strength gains. So if your program calls for 5 sets of 5 reps once a week, it's actually more effective for neurological strength gains to distribute that total volume. For instance, doing 1 set of 5 reps 5 times a week, as long as that crucial caveat is maintained. No fatigue.
Absolutely. That is the rule. If you choose to train more often, you must spread the sets out so widely that your last set of the day feels almost as fresh and high tension as the first one did. This maximizes neurological efficiency and consistency rather than relying on muscle exhaustion. Bodyweight drills like the Russian ballet leg thrust or the vacuum can easily be integrated throughout the day. You just do a few fresh reps here and there.
And beyond just strength, you mentioned that training the abs in a stretch position, like with the Swiss ball crunch, is critical for addressing posture. Yes, training in a stretched position, as opposed to the perpetually contracted position of a traditional crunch, is vital. It actively works against that adaptive shortening we talked about. This is what prevents the abs from becoming chronically short and contributing to that forward rounded posture we so often see.
And the simplest daily tool for posture, which works the deep core muscles without any equipment at all, is the vacuum exercise.
The vacuum exercise is an essential isometric drill. It's recommended daily throughout the day. It focuses on the transverse abdominis, which is your internal corset muscle. You consciously draw your abdomen in toward your spine. You suck it in as tight as you possibly can. It's easy to do discreetly. You can do it while waiting at a red light or standing in line for coffee. For a more advanced challenge, you perform the same drill on all fours. Now you're working directly against gravity and the weight of your internal organs, which creates immense tension in the deep core. It is the best low-key way to develop a tight, defined waistline.
Finally, we have the brief but pretty firm note on nutrition. Pavel states he sticks to what he knows, which is strength, but he still offers his 5 rubles on diet for maximizing results.
The advice is classic, it's straightforward. Significantly cut your starches and your sugars, and dramatically increase your protein intake. He even connects this idea to history, citing Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. He notes that the character Vronsky avoided sweet and starchy food for weight control over a century ago. So this emphasis on protein and avoidance of high carbohydrates is framed as a truly timeless method for controlling your body composition.
And then there's this rather intense historical footnote. It's about the psychological effects of diet, and it's linked to the Soviet Special Forces and the KGB.
Yes. Pavel notes a pretty chilling observation from his background. He claims that the high-carb, protein-restricted diet that was used in some Soviet Special Forces boot camps and KGB interrogation centers was allegedly scientifically designed not just for caloric restriction, but to actively disrupt neurotransmitters. He posits that this restrictive, mind-altering nutrition was actually an integral part of a broader brainwashing master plan, alongside things like sleep deprivation and psychological distress. It was designed to make people more pliable, less resistant, and easier to control.
That's a truly sobering claim about the impact of basic macronutrients on mental resilience and your state of mind. But bringing it back to the physical results, the commitment to this whole methodology promises really immediate, tangible changes in both strength and appearance.
The focus on neural efficiency delivers immediate strength increases. You feel stronger very quickly. And the book closes with a pretty aggressive, motivational promise. It quotes Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, "The abdomen is the reason a man does not easily mistake himself for a god." But the program promises that in a couple of months of bulletproof abs training, you may be mistaken for a Greek god or goddess. That's a bold guarantee, and it's rooted in applying these high-tension Russian strength secrets consistently.
This has been a really extensive deep dive. It's a revolutionary approach that essentially tells us everything we thought we knew about crunches, and the burn was precisely what was holding us back from real, functional, bulletproof strength. I mean, the sheer detail on technique and safety alone makes this required reading for anyone serious about training.
The fundamental takeaway, I think, is that shifting your focus from training for muscle exhaustion to training for maximal neurological tension is the single most efficient way to build a functional core. It requires less time, fewer reps, and far, far more focus on quality and intensity.
Thanks for listening to Core Concept HQ, where we turn complex ideas into simple insights. Subscribe for more summaries that help you learn, improve, and stay consistent.
And before we go, just consider this for a moment. The book emphasizes that people with excellent core strength often mistakenly attribute their success to ineffective exercises they happen to be doing. So if you accept that, what highly functional, non-apt activity might you currently be doing that contributes to your core strength through intense, high muscular tension like carrying heavy, awkward groceries or playing a specific demanding sport without you even realizing it? Think about where you generate true power transfer in your daily life.